man. But how's your week been going?
Been going pretty good. Looks like a short night for me. After you, I'm done for the night pretty much. Other than I'm encoring Nancy because she's got something going on tonight.
Oh, okay.
So something. Where'd you go?
I'm
I
here.
see your camera there, but no Jack.
I don't know. I don't know why it's not showing
You're
me.
not close enough to the camera.
Hang on a sec. Hmm. Why isn't that working? That doesn't make any sense. That's interesting. It's not showing me I'm the invisible man tonight.
Yeah, the invisible guy. Well, part of your hand showed up there.
Yeah, I'm putting my hand in front of the camera and everything. It's weird. Um. Hmm. Let me again.
So what we got for tonight, Jack?
Tonight, I've got an interesting show. We're going to assess where we are in the paranormal universe. I'm going to offer the listeners a parallax view of everything, basically, and we're going to explain and discuss in detail the two most disturbing cases ever recorded in paranormal research. They proved the case in point.
Sounds great.
So, yep, the Guaraparanga, Brazil human mutilation case and the Dyatlov Pass incident. Nick, you can't see me.
Roger's restreaming us tonight. So is the Great Conspiracy.
Nice. Wish I had a video feed for them, but they got a view of the outside of the bunker there.
Yeah, you could put that up. Put your slideshow up.
That's it right there. That's you're seeing the outdoors of the missile silo. Let's see.
I think you got to take the what's that thing called? There you go.
Can you see me now?
No.
Anybody? That's really weird.
Yeah.
It has to be something with their connection because my camera is on. Everything is set just right. Otherwise, you wouldn't even see the background there.
Yeah.
Here, I'll change it to. We're blasting through space currently.
There you go. Get ready for your countdown because it's coming right up. Like okay. Right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Jack, you're live for the very first time tonight, right about now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. We're broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories, and I am joined, as always, by the paranormal crime-fighting duo, Daisy and the Sundance Kid. We're working security in the silo tonight, and tonight we're going to be discussing... I'm going to offer you guys the parallax view. That's the subject and the title of this evening's broadcast, the parallax view. We're going to talk about the overall view of where we are right now in space and time on this crazy planet I like to call the Great Space Roller Coaster. And we are currently in the great upswing of the Kali Yuga. If you don't know what that means, then you have tuned in to the right program. We are going to educate you this evening on all things paranormal. I have had a bit of a cold this week, so you'll have to pardon me when I wet my whistle here, but that's the way things go on live radio, and it's been a crazy week here in the bunker. Down in the silo, we've been getting lots of work done, been getting lots of painting done, and finally put the finishing touches on one today that I like to call the dance. Maybe I'll get an image and it'll be up on the archived part of the program at some point. But tonight, we're going to talk about the two most disturbing cases in paranormal research. In 30 plus years of paranormal research, I came across two cases that are the most disturbing and offer some unique perspective, perhaps in the form of personal cases that I worked that are related to these two most disturbing cases. So if you've not heard of the Guaraparanga, Brazil human mutilation case, or the Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia, then you are in for a treat, because there is really nothing creepier in paranormal research than those two cases when they're examined in totality. And we'll get to that this evening, because they are really part of the parallax view. They are standout anomalies, right? And then the reality matrix, the materium that we are in, it's not the static normality around you that you study in order to get to the truth of the nature of the fabric of that reality. You study the anomalies. And chief among those anomalies are these two cases. And we're going to be getting to that this evening. But boy, what a crazy week in the crypto and precious metals market. If you've been following the show, you know that we cover such matters because we had many paranormal channels pointing us in the direction and the cyber prophecy that silver would become unobtainium. This would be timed with release of back-engineered technology, along with the Webbot's prediction of sci-fi world emerges. And I've explained what the Webbot is in minute detail over many broadcasts. So if you don't know what that is, just know that it is a algorithm designed long ago that studied the collective psychic abilities of the human species and made predictions according to that. That's really it in a nutshell. And that seemed to coincide perfectly with a lot of other avenues of intelligence, including and importantly, including the greater body of CIA trained remote viewers over the course of many decades now of time. Many of them have left the CIA over time. They form their own groups. These groups now do individualized targeting, as well as for corporations, governments, militaries, etc. And many of their predictions matched perfectly with things that the Webbot predicted long ago. And because of that, it led us into the so-called crazy world of cryptocurrencies and precious metals, in particular silver. Although lately I have been very interested in gold just because of the fluidity of that market. But it has been cyber prophesied, if you will, that silver will in time become so-called unobtainium. In other words, you simply will not be able to get your hands on it. There's many different reasons for this. Chief among those is the fact that the gold to silver ratio has really dropped over time. It used to be something crazy like 60 to 1, and now it's more like 6 to 1. In other words, it used to take like the same amount of effort. You could get one piece of gold, you could get like 60 pieces of silver. Now that ratio is down to 6 to 1, right? But that difference has not been reflected in the price. There's a lot of reasons for that. The most important reason from a paranormal perspective is the idea, the conspiratorial theory, the interesting financial rabbit hole that one goes down when you begin to hear the rumors out there all over the place that the silver market is widely manipulated and has been for a long, long time. Basically, the entire underpinning of the global bankster elite cabal that has had a stranglehold on the rest of the species for so many a decade have done it with the pin, if you will, the linchpin of the silver market. Without that, none of the rest of their manipulations could work. And because of the fact that silver is becoming very hard to find, at a time when many of them have manipulated the market in a way where they were short millions and millions of ounces of silver, has created an environment where there are explosive moves in both directions. It's like watching a huge battle take place every single day on your screen if you're into watching that kind of thing. And just know this, that the fate of the entire so-called Rex-Dew family lineages that have controlled the baking industry since its inception by the Templar Knights, their control is really at risk. Without control of that particular market, they will lose control over everything else. It's that important. It is the domino. If you can get that domino to fall and you watch silver rise to the point of unobtainium, then you're going to see a complete implosion of the past globalist cabal system and the banking system that they have used to enchain the rest of humanity. That's how important it is. So all of that has led us into this crazy world of the, well, cryptocurrencies and precious metals, and the conspiratorial world, if you will, unfolding right in front of our eyes in real time, watching it tick by tick. That's a fascinating place to be. And that, my friends, is sort of what I refer to as the parallax view. I discussed previously the idea that there was a huge deleveraging event that occurred in October, specifically October the 10th. And this was in all kinds of financial markets, but it began in the stablecoin market. Whoever that was able to engineer the timing of that particular glitch in the system that caused a historic cascade of leveraged trades to basically eliminate $1 trillion or more of wealth right out of the system and basically be in a position to benefit from it. That, my friends, is what I refer to as the man in the high castle. Man in the high castle has the ability of the parallax view at all times. The parallax view being the 30,000 foot bird's eye view of the whole puzzle. When you look into the world of intelligence gathering and military secrets and things like that, you discover that there are all kinds of so-called compartmentalization of information. Very few security clearances are high enough to where the person that possesses them is able to see all of the pieces of the puzzle at once. Imagine having the ability to use perhaps the World Wide Web and artificial intelligence and algorithms and what have you, to be able to channel such accurate information to yourself that it becomes an order of magnitude higher than that anybody else has achieved. And along with that comes this, accumulation, the ability to accumulate vast amounts of money. The point to where you can use those vast amounts to actually manipulate various markets if you know what you're doing. That kind of is what the October the 10th deleveraging event appears to have been. And what that does is it points in the direction of the idea that there is, in fact, a man in the high castle. That somebody somewhere is actually living that role. And who knows, maybe it's one of those things where it changes from time to time, from person to person, as they're able to maneuver into such a way that they're able to obtain that kind of information and able to actually use it as, what they call intelligence, but active intelligence, usable intelligence. And a lot of that comes down to timing. And what creates the best timing? The best information. That's what I'm talking about. But from the paranormal perspective, I refer to this as the parallax view. And the parallax view is one that's a little disconcerting when you begin to look at all the various pieces of the puzzle that make up where humanity is right now in this space, in this time, on this planet, in this universe, and in this material. That is the parallax view. And by that, I mean, like Graham Hancock likes to put it, we are a species with amnesia. More disturbingly than that, it appears as though it's a forced amnesia. In other words, somebody somewhere in a much higher pay grade than ours has gone to great lengths in order to cover up the true history of humanity. The answer to why that would be the case really is the answer to most of the mysteries on this planet. Why would somebody have a vested interest in making an entire species forget their true history? What advantage would that give over time? Those are the kinds of questions that we have to begin to analyze, and we have to begin to test and examine in a scientific way. And this leads us into the pieces of the puzzle that we do have regarding man's ancient past. Right. We do have things like the ancient pyramids, and we do have, astrophysicists like information being deposited in ancient cultures around the world. We do have records of gods having walked among our early ancestors. We do have all kinds of interesting accounts of our early ancestors being taught so-called forbidden knowledge. Perhaps all of that plays a part into this idea that we have suffered a forced amnesia of some kind, that we no longer remember our true abilities, what we accomplished in the past, because perhaps that's too dangerous for the control mechanism that is currently in place. But where does that leave us in the world of studying anomalies, and how do we begin to assess what the anomalies really mean for our understanding of the material in this fabric of reality? And by that, I mean cases like the Guaraparanga human mutilation case and the Dyatlov Pass incident that occurred in Russia, where 9 hikers were basically, I won't call it butchered, but they were beat up to the point where they suffered wounds that the medical examiners described as being the same as like a car wreck. You know, crushed internal bones and organs and stuff like that. One lady was missing her tongue. Interesting. But we'll get to the details of both of those cases in a moment. We are a species living on a planet that apparently in the past was inhabited by a non-human intelligence. That non-human intelligence conveyed certain information to our early ancestors, and then I suspect went about building all of the many megalithic structures around the planet in order to contain mathematically within them the great secrets that they conveyed to our early ancestors through the mystery schools. It is also talked about in the Sumerian tablets, in the Book of Genesis, and the Book of Enoch, and many other ancient historical accounts that there was an interbreeding that took place. That interbreeding led, of course, to offspring. Those offspring were half whatever these creatures were and half human. They looked human. And they were placed in all of the various power positions around the planet. In other words, the Sumerian tablets talk about the very first so-called priest king of any city was referred to as Adamu, A-D-A-M-U, in the city of E.Den, or Eden. And it's interesting that it recounts how this occurred in all of the various kingdoms. In other words, the offspring of this interbreeding that took place ended up becoming the royal lineages of all of the different kingdoms around the world. This is the origin of the so-called dragon kings. This is how all of that began. And these offspring were gifted psychically. Today, the government likes to refer to that as psionics, but they had the ability to really kind of outthink the rest of the species, and they were able to take advantage of the rest of humanity in many different ways. One of those ways was the banking system. Also, it's interesting to note that it appears as though certain elements in the same ancient royal lineage, if you will, which today makes up roughly 200 families around the world, have elements in the aerospace industries and embedded in the government's SAP programs. So you're talking about people that have for centuries been able to utilize their positions in order to maintain not only power, but intelligence. I mean, what better way to maintain your power than through the ultimate tool of the intelligence agencies? That's how you do it. That's how you achieve superior information that is an order of magnitude higher than anyone else. It is in turn these SAP programs and the aerospace industry that has intelligence agents embedded within it that are in control of all of the back engineered alien technology that we are said to have accumulated over the many decades since Roswell, and even years before, we know now from the Trinity crash evidence. And whether or not this particular technology came from the same species that interbred with us, as recounted in the historical past, is a real up in the air kind of question. We just don't know the answer to that. In other words, we might be living on a planet that's so weird, in a reality matrix that's so weird, that we're a species living with amnesia controlled by a ancient royal lineage that was created by a species which isn't part of us through a financial mechanism that we simply cannot deal with, and on top of that are openly within their circles, I suppose, and behind the scenes are actively recovering alien technology and back engineering it. All of this is happening at a time and at a place on a planet that is in a planetary periodic cycle called the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is a time and period when we begin to go through another golden age. All of these many forces are colliding right now, and it will soon be decided whether the sort of dark forces of a past age are able to cling on to power going into the upswing of the Kali Yuga, or if all of that will be broken into tiny little pieces and swept away by the true nature of the universe. In other words, we could be the big surprise, not the nefarious forces that are currently enslaving humanity. And that is sort of the parallax view. On top of that, we live on a paranormal planet. And it is a planet with interdimensional doorways. A planet with doorways to different places and different times, and that has actually been witnessed. And we're going to get back to all of this crazy talk right after our break.
All right, we're on radio break. Great job, Jack.
Cool.
Hey, have you caught a glimpse at any of those links I sent you on Facebook?
I haven't even been on Facebook.
Well, I could tell for a long time.
Other than posting on a painting that I finished literally today, I have not even had time to do it. Be on there, so I'll do a big catch-up session pretty soon. And
yeah, there's some really crazy stuff. I don't know if it'll go out of date soon, so I hope you can get to them soon.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely look at. Maybe tonight I'll sit down.
Yeah, I sent you some South American Bigfoot type stuff. There was some other stuff too in there that was very interesting as well.
There's been a lot of that going on as far as South America and Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to South America, I always think more of a dogman or werewolf type character down there, prowling and creeping around.
Oh yeah,
But I
some of
don't.
those.
I know it's there too, but it's not as. It doesn't seem as prevalent as like some of these Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the type of Bigfoot too is it's described a lot different than the North American one. It's described more of a great ape that
I
evolved.
remember hearing a Amazon bush pilot who claims that he was flying up over a ridge and there was one of those creatures standing in the top of a tree, and he said that thing was absolutely enormous. He couldn't believe the size of it.
Yeah. Well, they seem to be thinner down there, but the age, no, well not age, but the height range is still about the same. As like the skunk ape,
Right.
which I found kind of interesting when they were comparing it. And then there's like a miniature version, like a pygmy species of Bigfoot that lived down there too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I never heard of it before until I started, kind of digging into that. I was like, man, because I got a little tired of the current event stuff, and I was like, man, let me see what's going on in cryptozoology. And I heard this one podcast, and I was like, and they were talking about these like pygmy species. They're only about 4 or 5 feet, well, 3 to 4 feet tall.
Uh-huh.
Looks almost just like a Bigfoot, but it has all the characteristics, but they're small and they're kind of group. They work in groups, and the people down there gift them to keep them out of their homes and away from their property.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's been going on since, I guess, ever since the colonials and the indigenous have lived there.
It doesn't surprise me, and they're found on every continent worldwide. So
Yeah, but you don't hear about too much about pygmy species
no, you don't. But you don't hear much coming out of that part of the world.
at all.
Period.
Yeah. Well, we got about 30 seconds, but I wanted to pass that on to you so that you can take and bookmark and tab that for later on. It's really interesting stuff.
I will check that out because that'd be a good topic for a book, actually.
Yeah, and well, I'll get you on the end of the show here. Here's your countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Jack, you are alive and back on the air right about now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey. I've got a face for milk cartons and a voice for smell-o-vision, and tonight we're talking about the parallax view. The idea that we're trying to seek out in a paranormal way higher magnitude of information by examining various puzzle pieces and how they might fit together and how this actually fits into our everyday reality. Crazy world we're living on. I just mentioned that we were living on a paranormal planet, and that is the title of my first book. You might want to check that out if you like to deep dive the subject matter. Paranormal Planet is available on Amazon along with my other books on the subject matter. And, I talk about in Paranormal Planet the idea that, not only are we a species with perhaps genetically altered and interbred with by another non-human species, and that they went about building megalithic structures to sort of encapsulate the so-called forbidden knowledge that they relayed to their offspring in mathematical form, and then they sort of just disappeared into history. I have my theories as to why that's the case. But ever since, their offspring have been in power on this planet. And that sort of feeds into my idea that the Earth itself is perhaps seeded by a Type 3 civilization on a so-called Kardashev scale. And not only that, but weirdly enough, we live on a planet that has interdimensional doorways. They appear to be naturally occurring. It looks as though the very structure of our planet lends itself to this kind of activity. It appears that a Russian research paper published in the 1960s titled "The Earth as a Large Crystal" may actually hold the key to the entire mystery of interdimensional doorways on this planet. The theory really works like this. In the early stages of the planetary development of the Earth, it was a large crystal. Over time and through spinning, it took on a round structure, but it wasn't perfectly round. There are areas where the surface sort of protrudes on this crystalline structure, the original structure. And today, those 12 places can be traced around the world as being the 12 so-called Devil's Triangles. They are the places where a heightened degree of paranormal activity takes place. And in my book, Paranormal Planet, I theorize a unified field theory of paranormal activity. It stipulates that there are only two forms of paranormal activity. One is Earth's interaction with a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale, and the other is interdimensional in nature. Here we have a scientific paper which perfectly outlines how and why the structure of our planet can contain quartz crystal deposits that are so vast that when they are compressed through the Earth's movement through space, they become ionized. And when they become ionized, they emit so-called electromagnetic fields that are so strong that they can literally tear a hole in the fabric or membrane that separates our dimension from other dimensions. When this occurs, there is a moment action that takes place before the membrane can repair itself, and we refer to that interaction as paranormal in nature, when in fact it's actually a naturally occurring mechanism. On top of that, it appears as though from various government sources, including an FBI memo dated 1947, shortly after Roswell, and testimony from Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna in the last few months. How weird of a connection is that? Both of them point us in the direction that the government is aware that there are species in other dimensions that have figured out a way into this one. And that the visitors, as they like to refer to them, the creatures that keep coughing up crashed alien technology to us, and there's various theories as to why their craft are crashing. That particular species may actually originate from another dimension. In other words, our government may have technology in their hands that didn't even originate in this reality. Think about that. What if you could weaponize that? you would become, by default, the man in the high castle. So that's really what's at stake. There are certain insiders in the Pentagon's UFO program that have sort of put it out there in ufology community that the reason why everything is kept such a secret is because there are enemies of the United States that also possess some of that technology and who are actively seeking to weaponize it. And so are we. That seems plausible. Is it true? I don't know. But that's part of the rabbit hole architecture that we can't get rid of. It's there whether we like it or not. On top of that, as I mentioned, the Earth is probably seeded and is owned by a so-called Type 3 civilization. And what is that? That simply goes to the great scientist Enrico Fermi's postulate that, and he had mathematical equations that proved it, that if you took the Drake equation, which calculates the number of intelligent civilizations that would develop within a galaxy over a given amount of time, according to all of their math, at least one of them would have been created long before humanity, so long that they would have been around for billions of years and would have survived it. They would have become so technologically advanced through the things like, artificial intelligence, von Neumann probes, which are self-replicating, AI, nanotechnology robots that you use if you're an intelligent species to go out and colonize space. If you take that theory that was put out by Enrico Fermi, what he basically says in his writings is that one of them would have survived long enough to have colonized the entire Milky Way galaxy. They would be in full control of it. Nothing would happen there without their say-so, and you would see evidence of it. It's a funny thing that Enrico Fermi wasn't paying attention to the modern-day UFO phenomenon. It never occurred to them that the creators, the progenitors, the ones who seeded this planet, didn't want one-on-one communication with us, at least not yet. Perhaps that's part of their entire farming process. But my theory is this. And Enrico Fermi was famous for saying that the absence of aliens on our doorstep is in itself significant. In other words, he was inferring that aliens couldn't exist because if they did, they would be here. Well, guess what, Enrico? They were and are here. What that means is that his mathematics are proven true. And along with that, it means that by proxy, there in fact has to be a Type 3 civilization in control of the Milky Way galaxy. And what do we see with the UFO phenomenon time and time again? What appear to be almost living craft, sentient, artificially intelligent, drone craft that are sent here from who knows how far away in order to perform functions on this planet that have to do with the farming of it. One of those functions is in testing the human food supply. And here is where you have the offshoot of the rabbit hole of not only cattle mutilations, but of human mutilations, apparently. And this brings up one of the two most disturbing cases I ever looked into. This is known among hardcore paranormal researchers as the Guaraparanga, Brazil human mutilation case. And what if I told you that I have the actual coroner's report in my possession from this case? Because here was an individual, male, human, discovered near a water reservoir, completely exsanguinated, missing an eye, rectum cord out, half moon incision along the jawline, hair and skin fused together at 450 degrees. We're talking about a human that had all of the same wounds and the same MO as a cattle mutilation. Let that sink in. Not only that, but the coroner's report is fascinating. It says right in the report that the individual died from, quote, vital reaction. And what's a vital reaction? Because I had to look that up. That means that this guy was alive when they did it to him, and he died from the sheer amount of pain it caused. Not only that, but what if I told you that the coroner goes on to state that all of the wounds on the body of this individual were inflicted by a machine, and that it appears as though that machine was manufactured in order to do just that and nothing else. What about that? Because that implies somebody with a factory who's making something like that to perform a function like that. For what? A one-off case that we discovered? I doubt it. I doubt it. And alongside that, we have the cattle mutilation phenomenon, which mirrors the wounds on this individual. And we have a report from the National Institute for Discovery Science, which was founded by Robert Bigelow of Skinwalker Ranch fame and of Bigelow Aerospace, in which it states that they examined, at the behest of the U.S. government, the cattle mutilation phenomenon, and what they discovered was that it had to be some kind of testing of the food supply. That the food supply had to be contaminated. In this particular case, the beef supply. They were able to trace all of that to a scientist in 1970s in Fort Collins, Colorado, who injected wildlife with Kuru virus, and one of the deer from the facility escaped into the wild. It was the very next season that you began to see cases of chronic wasting disease in the wildlife population. Chronic wasting disease in the bovine or cattle population becomes what they call bovine encephalopathy spongiform. In other words, it becomes mad cow disease. The effects of mad cow disease are all subclinical before the 5th year. And we always butcher our cattle before that 5th year. Otherwise, you would see it. They were able to trace that to the meteoric rise of early onset dementia in the human population, something like 1,300%. Interesting, no? And here you have craft that are examining that on a planet that they seeded and a species that they own like a herd. That makes sense. That would make sense even to Enrico Fermi, right? And then you have the second most disturbing case, which is the Dyatlov Pass incident, in which 9 hikers in Russia went missing. They eventually found their bodies on the so-called Mountain of the Dead. They were warned not to go there by the local indigenous Mansi people. And in the journal of one of the hikers, a female, she wrote, "Now we know the snowmen are real." When they examined the photographs taken by the camera that was recovered with one of the bodies, they discovered a photograph of what appeared to be a huge Russian Yeti-like creature peering out from a tree. Did that have a hand in their eventual death? Because it was only a couple of nights later, it appears, that they ended up camping in a wide open area away from the forest, exposed to the wind. Why would you do that in the middle of winter, away from the forest? And then they find the tent, and the tent has been cut from the inside so that whoever was inside could see out. In other words, something scared them so badly that they wouldn't even go outside the tent. They cut an eye hole in order to see what it was. And I'm betting whatever it was got them to take off running right out of the tent, because they were all found without their shoes, far away from the tent. A couple of them had tried to start a fire. One of the females' tongues was missing. Some of them had internal damage to their organs and bones in such a way that it looked like they had been in a car wreck of some kind. And off in the distance, way down in a valley, not far from the Mountain of the Dead, there were other campers. And those campers reported that on the night that those people must have died up on Dyatlov Pass, they noticed some very strange lights hovering above the mountain. And how many times have we seen the Bigfoot species actually be accompanied by strange lights? I'm not saying that Bigfoot had a hand in their deaths, but it is interesting. And the missing tongue is in particularly very interesting, because you have with that the same type of wound caused in the Guaraparanga human mutilation case. A severing of the tongue. Same thing occurs in cattle mutilations. Could it be that these are drone craft performing functions like that, and that they're not always perfect? I don't know, because the coroner seemed to think that whatever did it was designed for that and for nothing else. That would lead any investigator to believe that it's quite likely and quite possible that there are other unknown cases of that occurring. Could it be that they're tracing the contaminated food supply into the human population and are then testing some particular humans for that contamination? It's quite possible. At the heart of it all is something called prion proteins, and prion proteins are almost impossible to destroy. If you consume them over time, they become deposited into the brain and they cause all kinds of damage. And nobody really knows where prion proteins come from. That's why it would be interesting for a type 3 civilization to actually be investigating this contamination on a planet that they theoretically would own. That's the parallax view. And why do we study all of this weird paranormal stuff all the time? Because it's through glimpses of cases like that that you get a little glimpse behind the curtain that's been pulled over the truth to keep you from seeing what's really going on. And all the while is that sort of ever beckoning question of why. Why hide it? The answer to that question is the answer to most paranormal phenomenon on this planet. Going back to the interdimensional doorways, it appears as though we've got creatures that are coming through those doorways, and those creatures, at least some of them, appear to be predatory in nature. In other words, we've got a lot of missing people that have gone missing in areas that are heavily wooded and mountainous. It's heavily wooded, mountainous areas that you find high concentrations of quartz crystal. It's in these areas you find doorways naturally occurring to other dimensions. And it's in these areas that you apparently have a paranormal predator of some kind preying upon humans. And with that, I refer to the missing 411 phenomenon. So that's the planet that you live on. A planet filled with cryptid animals, a planet being visited by autonomous, sentient, artificially intelligent craft that are literally designed to perform functions on this planet of maintaining it for a species that has seeded it for their own ends. On top of that, the species they seeded with their own ends apparently has been genetically manipulated and interbred with. And those antecedents, those relatives, if you will, living relatives, are even today in control of most of the planet. And that, my friends, is the parallax view. It's the world that we find ourselves in right now. And every day when you're watching the news now, you'll begin to see it in a different light. We live in fascinating times and on a fascinating planet, and there is never a day that should go by that doesn't fascinate you. Living here and being here in this time and in this space. Because we are truly on the Great Space roller coaster. And you'll have to join me next week, guys. We'll be examining some more craziness. I wanted to get back to talking about the so-called testimony of Billy Corgan, the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins, and his encounter with somebody in the music industry that was a shapeshifter. That's a real deal story, and we're going to talk about that next week and how all of that might fit into the greater view of what's going on. And stay tuned for more quality programming right after this.
Awesome job, Jack. Thanks.
Cool, sure.
Just stick with me for a little bit. I'm going to do a transition here so that I can get her encore up.
Cool.
All right.
That's awesome.
And get Zombies Act going over on TMV.
Nice.
All right, let's see here. I'm done with this broadcaster. And yeah, if you get a chance, please do take a look at that.
I will.
Some of those
totally.
links. Yeah.
I will, and I'm still going to get you that embed code too. I should be. Actually, this week is going to be a good week because a lot of the stuff taking up my time is going to kind of come to a close. So.
Okay. Let's see here.